Canelo Alvarez stops the 40-1 underdog Avni Yildirim in the corner during the end of the third round, heading to the fourth round, as Avni Yildirim trainer waved the white flag in the corner. For the people that don't know, Avni is a former Canelo Alvarez sparring partner. So he was brought in to make a highlight reel for Canelo Alvarez. But it never fails to amaze me how biased the commentary was for the zone, claiming Canelo Alvarez fights the best, when this is truly the cherry pick of the year. Would you guys believe Floyd Mayweather received more criticism fighting Pacquiao, Ortiz, Guerrero than Canelo Alvarez received fighting Avni? And that's a fact. This is actually my first time watching highlights of a fight, because this fight was truly a waste of time. This is also my first time making a post-fight video before the actual fight, since this fight is so meaningless. More importantly, let's talk about the absolute truth that old media tried to bury during the whole lead up to this fight. To put things in perspective, for the people that's trying to defend the cherry pick of the year by Canelo Alvarez by claiming Avni Yildirim was Canelo Alvarez mandatory. First of all, it's so hypocritical for Canelo Alvarez to now be interested in mandatories all of a sudden. However, when Jermall Charlo was his WBC mandatory at 160 for years, all of a sudden, as soon as the WBC was forced to order the fight between Canelo Alvarez and his mandatory Jermall Charlo, Canelo Alvarez declined the fight and was stripped of his WBC title for avoiding his mandatory. However, to save face, because obviously Canelo Alvarez have the complexion for the connection to get the ultimate protection, Canelo requested the WBC to make up a title in order to save face to why he's ducking his mandatory Jermall Charlo. Now, mind you, at this time, Canelo Alvarez, his plan and his goal was to become undisputed, the first Mexican undisputed middleweight champion of all time. That's what Canelo promised his own fans. However, because there were two undefeated black fighters in his own division, and we know Canelo Alvarez's motto is NBF, no black fighters, Charlo and Andrade forced Canelo Alvarez to give up on his dream and move up to a division full of European fighters. Now, at 168, Canelo Alvarez was never interested in becoming undisputed until David Benavidez, he lost his belt on the scale. That's when Canelo Alvarez's dream came true. Now the division is full of European fighters, and we know Canelo Alvarez, he's Europe pound for pound #1. So as soon as David Benavidez lost his belt, just like Canelo did with Andrade at 154, when Andrade was the WBO champion. For the people that's not informed, Andrade was a champion and Canelo was not a champion at the time. Andrade told Canelo, "I'm willing to give you a title shot, grow some cojones and fight me." Then Andrade even went as far as calling him the B word. However, Canelo Alvarez respectfully declined. But would you believe, as soon as Andrade vacated his belt, literally the next day, Canelo Alvarez requested the WBO to order a fight between him and Smith, which is ironically the same thing he did to David Benavidez at 168. So when it comes to Canelo Alvarez, it's not just NBF, it's also NMF, no Mexican fighters. Because surprisingly, Canelo recently came out and said, "I'm not going to fight any more Mexican fighters." I guess Canelo forgot he fought the likes of Chavez Jr., Lopez, Angulo, so on and so forth. But when it came to David Benavidez, he no longer interested in fighting his own people. We know what time it is. So like I said before, as soon as David Benavidez lost his belt on the scale. Canelo Alvarez requested the WBC to order the fight between him and Avni Yildirim. And just to make it clear, this was last year during the pandemic, in which DAZN actually declined the fight, and they told him that he has to fight a premier fighter. This is a clear cherry pick, and this cherry pick caused Canelo Alvarez to lose his contract with DAZN. That's when Canelo Alvarez had a court case with DAZN and they settled it out of court. In other words, Canelo became a free agent. He still works with DAZN. However, he no longer gets paid $33 million guaranteed, and he for sure lost his contract for cherry picking Avni, or attempting to. But would you believe he still pursued cherry picking Avni after it cost him a DAZN contract worth of $365 million? So Canelo Alvarez, he requested the WBC to order the fight between him and Avni, a fighter coming off a loss and a 2-year layoff. Now, back in 2020, Canelo was supposed to fight Avni for that WBC title. However, because Canelo have the WBC in his pocket, he just requested them to give him the belt and then make Avni the mandatory, so he can sell that story later. Therefore, he actually fought Caleb Smith for the WBC belt when Caleb Smith had nothing to do with the WBC. He wasn't in the rankings because he was the WBA super champion. But again, truth be told, Canelo Alvarez is the WBC president because Canelo Alvarez does whatever he wants to do. So this was a thought out plan by Canelo Alvarez. It's called the ducking plan, the witness protection plan against undefeated black fighters and Mexican fighters. For Canelo to call himself the best, become undisputed, and avoid any dangerous rival. That's how we all got here today, ladies and gentlemen, where Canelo Alvarez sold the story of him defending the WBC title against Avni after requesting the WBC to make the fight between him and Avni instead of David Benavidez and Canelo Alvarez, or David Benavidez or whoever else, because David Benavidez is the first in line because he was the former champion and the guy who's ranked number 1 under the WBC. Matter of fact, David Benavidez is the man that beat Avni. However, you see all these fans, they want to deflect and ignore Canelo Alvarez ducking tactics when he's ducking not one body, not two body, but everybody. From Jamal Charlo to Andrade for the past 6 years to this day, and now David Benavidez, who is another fighter in his own division. And to make matter worse, Canelo is fighting for David Benavidez's WBC title. I can guarantee you that majority of the comments will be about Jamal Charlo ducking David Benavidez. Even though it's Canelo Alvarez fight week or fight day, on top of all of the above, Canelo is ducking David Benavidez while fighting for his title. They in the same division. And they don't call Canelo a duck. But they so quick to call Jamal Charlo a duck when he's not even in the same division. And they have until September 2021 to make the fight happen. Therefore, if Charlo doesn't fight David Benavidez by then you could call Charlo a duck. However, for the moment in time, David Benavidez has a fight coming up. So is Charlo. However, these decafs don't give Canelo Alvarez the same energy, who been ducking for centuries, but they so quick to call Charlo a duck literally the next day. So keep the same energy. Quit deflecting. Today is Canelo Alvarez fight day. It ain't Jamal Charlo. It ain't David Benavidez. So the topic of conversation is Canelo Alvarez being the number 1 pound for pound cherry picker of the decade. Because I have never ever seen this done before. Like I said before, when Canelo Alvarez requested for witness protection, the NBF franchise witness protection, in order to avoid his mandatory Jamal Charlo at 160, the WBC President Suleiman's explanation of this franchise designation is to avoid any unnecessary mandatories. So the $1 million question, why didn't Canelo Alvarez activate his franchise designation to avoid the unnecessary mandatory with Avni? Unless the franchise designation is a fake belt, is no better than the belt you purchase from Walmart to keep your pants up. And because Canelo's goal is to become undisputed, to avoid any dispute, he's trying to keep the regular title, the original title, the real title, until he do so by cherry picking Avni and keeping the title or winning the title. But this is old news because Suleiman, he stated out of his own mouth, the franchise title is not a title nor a championship. It's pretty much a trophy, in which Suleiman clarified that it was Canelo Alvarez who requested it, just like he requested to fight Avni as well. So that's a further proof that Canelo is the pioneer of the NBF franchise witness protection program that Teofimo Lopez, Ryan Garcia, Oscar Valdez is all a part of. And an honorable mention for an old member, Vasil Lomachenko. There's even rumors that 6ix9ine looking to join the NBF witness protection franchise program by Canelo Alvarez because, truth be told, it has every other witness protection program beat by a long shot. So to avoid any shot, 6ix9ine looking to join as well. All jokes aside, to point out the double standards in the sport of boxing, when Floyd Mayweather beat Manny Pacquiao in the fight of the decade, Floyd Mayweather, the next fight, I believe he was 38 years old. It was his retirement fight. He chose to fight Andre Berto. Now, Andre Berto was a two-time former champion. He just knocked out Lopez, so he was coming off a good win. The same Lopez that Canelo Alvarez fought and made him move up 2 weight divisions. Floyd Mayweather fought Berto as a farewell fight. Do you know how much criticism Floyd Mayweather received? I'm talking about old media members. They be questioning Floyd, even though Floyd proved himself for 20 years, fought the best, beat the likes of Pacquiao, Canelo, Mosley, Cotto, Corrales, and the list goes on and on and on and on. He fought 23 world champions, coming off their biggest wins. They criticizing Floyd Mayweather like there is no tomorrow, knowing that that's his last fight after he was coming off his biggest win against Manny Pacquiao. So Floyd Mayweather proved himself time and time again. They treated Berto like a bum off the street. Fast forward till today, Canelo Alvarez is 30 years old, in his prime. He's active. He literally just fought a couple months ago. He's not just ducking one body, 2 bodies. Nah, he's ducking everybody. The fans and old media know Canelo Alvarez requested to cherry pick Avni, a fighter coming off a loss and a 2-year layoff, for David Benavidez's belt. And throughout the lead up, no one asked Canelo Alvarez any of the real questions, such as, how come you fighting Avni, a fighter coming off a loss and a 2-year layoff? Why did you request to fight Avni for David Benavidez's WBC title? I'm talking about, they asked them none of the real journalist questions, that's the title of their job. However, instead, they want to be a bunch of fanboys and call Canelo Alvarez, you pound for pound number 1. And they got Canelo screaming pound for pound as if he fighting Godzilla. as if he fighting Jamal Charlo, as if he fighting David Benavidez, when in reality, he's fighting a fighter coming off a loss and a 2-year layoff. They have Canelo Alvarez talking about his legacy he's leaving behind. They calling him the Kobe, the LeBron. And it's like, are you serious? Against Avni, a fighter coming off a loss? You know, if Floyd Mayweather was in that position and he cherry-picked Avni, they will have dragged his name through the mud. Matter of fact, to all of the decafs, I challenge any one of you to name me an Avni in Floyd Mayweather resume that Floyd Mayweather fought in his prime. But see, the difference between Floyd Mayweather, the fighters themselves called Floyd Mayweather the best, not biased fanboy journalists that acting like a bunch of fanboys. Think about it. Oscar De La Hoya, when Floyd Mayweather beat Sugar Shane Mosley, he said that Floyd Mayweather is the greatest of all time. And you guys know how much Oscar De La Hoya envies Floyd. On the other hand, Canelo Alvarez, yeah, he's pound for pound number one. He's the number one pound for pound cherry picker. He's Europe pound for pound number one, because all he does is fight European fighters. He fought the whole Smith family that no one ever heard of in Texas, but he won't fight none of the Charlo twins that's from Texas. Let that sink in. He wouldn't fight any undefeated black fighters nor any undefeated Mexican fighters. However, it never fails to amaze me the double standards in the sport. All you have to do is watch Floyd Mayweather interviews with Brian Kinney, and I challenge you to name me any interviewer that's playing Kenny Bryan role for Canelo Alvarez. There isn't none. They are afraid to ask Canelo Alvarez the real questions. They wouldn't even ask Canelo Alvarez, what's your thoughts on Timothy Bradley, stating Canelo is not fighting the best. Yildirim is a punching bag. I'm not paying. However, they asked Avni that question when Avni is here just to cash a check. At the end of the day, it's an opportunity for him. But for Canelo Alvarez, who supposedly is pound for pound number one, is cherry picking a fighter coming off a loss. That's who you need to ask that question to. And it's ironic as well that Terrence Crawford was always pound for pound number one. ESPN had Terrence number two and Lomachenko number one when they erased his loss. Out of nowhere, as soon as Lomachenko get beat, some way, somehow, Canelo surpasses Terrence Crawford, as if Terrence wasn't the next in line. When all reality, Terrence Crawford was always pound for pound number one till this day. Terrence Crawford never lost. Meanwhile, Canelo lost to Floyd. Truth be told, he also robbed Lara, and he had a draw with Gennady Golovkin. Do you know if Terrence Crawford fights an Avni, a fighter coming off a loss and a 2-year layoff, they will be dragging Terrence Crawford's name through the mud. But again, Terrence does not have the complexion for the protection. He's just another fighter on the coincidental list. He damn if he do, damn if he don't. On the other hand, Canelo is on the hope list. If he do or don't, he will be praised. Put it that way. With that being stated, everything I stated in this video was a fact. It's not an opinion. You could search it, it's provable. Everything I stated is the whole absolute truth, and I put it together like puzzle every single time. So when the truth is spoken, the other side is nothing but a lie. You can't disagree with facts with your emotional opinion, because everything I state is factual. Therefore, drop your thoughts in the comment section below, subscribe below, and click on the notification bell to be continued on the next episode of AKHi, AKHi TV. Peace, and we out here.
How did you choose Lomachenko? Because
I did not choose him. He requested, Canelo requested So we sent out a vote and we analyzed his history.
Ooh, Canelo and Lomachenko requested?
Absolutely.
Ooh, you just made headlines.
Lomachenko,
You just made headlines.
Lomachenko, top rank, requested.
Ah.
And let me tell you, we analyzed the request. Top of the top.
Define the franchise belt. Can you define it?
The franchise is not a belt, it's not a championship, it's a designation given to elite, unique fighters who carry the industry of the sport of boxing. Canelo Alvarez and Lomachenko are two sensational fighters who carry the industry.